A content warning. The podcast contains following material that may be harmful and upsetting to some audiences. Please feel free to skip to
209.
if violent visual narration is triggering to you. Thank you.
And millions of people around the world are welcoming in the Year of the Rabbit as the Chinese Lunar Year celebrations begin. The event kicks off a 15-day festival, and it's the first time since the pandemic began that it's being held without any travel restrictions in China. The BBC's Michael Bristow reports.
There's excitement and relief as China begins celebrating its first Lunar New Year since the lifting of COVID restrictions. Not surprisingly, there were more travellers than last year. As expected.
Celebrations are marking the Lunar New Year, the year of the ox, and that includes fireworks. Artists in China threw molten iron against a wall to create these effects. The pandemic, though, has again put a damper on most festivities. And in this country, what should be a celebratory time coincides with a disturbing surge of racist attacks against Asian Americans. Here's CBS's Nancy Chen.
This surveillance footage shows a 71-year-old Asian grandmother violently shoved to the ground, her purse stolen. Just one of several attacks in California's Bay Area recently. A 91-year-old man pushed in Oakland's Chinatown, one of 3 attacks that day. 84-year-old Thai American Visha Ratanapakdi knocked over while out for a walk. He died a few days later from his injuries. His family saying they believe it was rooted in racism.
The SARS-CoV-2, also known as COVID-19 or coronavirus, took the world by storm during March of 2020.
Commercial airways were discontinued, local restaurants went bankrupt, and preserving public health became stricter by the day.
As a result, families spent more time in their homes and did whatever they could just to get by the pandemic. This is also the case for Asian communities.
Families stockpiled food and supplies, while some got laid off from the only source of income they had. Ultimately, to an extent, everyone felt uncertain of the future, and this loss of control results in fear.
Without an outlet for these emotions, people tend to search for something to blame with the objective of disassociating themselves from the problem.
And with the disease originating from China, Asians were the perfect scapegoats.
That said, crimes have gone up since. Specifically, crime where a niche group of people are victims. According to the California Department of Justice, this is known by definition as a hate crime. Hi, my name is Alan.
And my name is Sant.
And with the increase of hate crimes, addressing misconceptions and recognizing propaganda raises the urgency in providing salvation for Asian Americans.
There are 2 terms I hear often, hate crimes and hate incidents. What's the difference?
I'm glad you asked. Although they might sound synonymous with each other, hate crimes are much more extreme. According to the police department of Danville, a hate incident is when an action is motivated by hate but is not going against any present laws, whereas a hate crime is considered as, well, a crime.
So, would a microaggression be considered a hate incident? Or, I guess, is saying something that is racist towards somebody a hate incident?
It would be, but unfortunately, people cannot be punished from just speaking. Shown in the media, the freedom of speech has been overly exploited where anything Asian related were considered primary targets of those incidents. This has significantly increased the number of baseless rumors and individuals believing those rumors.
I guess the pandemic really brought attention to Asians, and not exactly in a positive light either. And I know that COVID did originate from China, but the entire race is not at fault. Even so, there are others that would think otherwise. Reported by a study from the California State University, the percentage of hate crimes across the largest cities and counties within the first few months of 2021 alone rose by 164%.
And as seen on the news, these crimes also consist of mass shootings. For example, the 2021 shooting in Atlanta.
In March 2021, a man by the name of Robert Aaron Long went to 3 different spas, and within an hour, he shot and killed 8 people.
A New York Times article about the shooting stated that he, quote-unquote, denied targeting the victims because of their race, but instead, he claimed to have struggled with a sex addiction. But based on the shooting locations, it's pretty clear to say that there were racial motivation behind Long's actions.
This is not the first shooting to shake the Asian communities, nor has it been the last. 9 months following this event, another devastating murder struck Chinatown.
In our very own city of Chicago, NBC News reported that during the afternoon of December 7th, a man by the name of Alfonso Joyner shot 22 rounds and killed a 71-year-old man, Woon Sing Si. I've personally been associated with this case, and I understand the time and effort involved to try and recover from such a tragedy. Every month, the family has to appear in court and progress the trial. And every visit, the family is reminded of Mr. C's murder. The trial was expected to last around 4 years.
For a case like that, Mr. C's trial should not have been expected to last this long. How would you process a pain that feels invisible to the public when you see people slowly forget about something that should never be forgotten?
Honestly, you can't. That's what's difficult to process. My colleague told me that while they were at Mr. C's funeral, the family greeted and thanked all the visitors as they left, never showing despair. But after the final greeting was said, the family went up to Mr. C's body, and that's when they finally broke down in tears.
To those listening or reading about this in the news, it is hard to completely understand and empathize with all of the moving pieces of the story. So it's also hard to pinpoint the exact reason for why these hate crimes are committed.
Those of Asian descent are not as assimilated with American culture as other minority groups, making it noticeably more difficult to raise awareness and speak out against, as they are treated as quote-unquote outsiders. A CNN article on why hate crimes are committed lists that one reason is from the fact that the assailant feels as though they are defending their country against another to protect their identity. This justifies their actions for themselves.
At first glance, one could mistake this as a way of showing patriotism. However, going as far as to murder those who are different from you in the same society just for the protection of your country is actually just a hate crime stemming from xenophobia. Xenophobia is a fear and dislike of strangers and foreigners, or even anything that just appears strange or foreign.
They don't assimilate because Asian immigrants have a tight grip on their culture, and just from the fact that the difference between American culture and Asian culture is just too big.
So in turn, Asian Americans still seem like, quote-unquote, strangers to Americans, despite newer generations being born and raised in America.
And to some, I think that'll never change. They think we should fix the problem on a more general scale. A way this can be achieved is just by focusing on overall crime instead of hate crimes specifically.
Statistically speaking, during the peak year of quarantine, there were more general crimes than hate crimes in 2021, about a little more than 1 million violent crimes compared to the 7,000 hate crimes that year. Therefore, we shouldn't be putting our efforts towards hate crimes alone, but having general violent crimes be the main focus.
Despite the numbers implying obvious urgency, a BBC News article in 2018 proves otherwise. Citizens, as a part of the community in relation to the victim, are able to put themselves in their shoes and feel anger, fear, and despair. Going back to Woom Sing See's case, although the media has moved on pretty quickly, the whole community is still currently feeling the effects of his death over a year later. This is the case for other hate crimes as well.
In California, CNN reported a mass shooting in a Monterey Park dance hall. A devastating amount of 11 people were killed during a time of celebration, during the Lunar New Year. For those who went out to honor this tradition in California, it may never feel the same for a long time.
And unfortunately, these tragic events will continue to happen regardless of efforts to assimilate.
Although we cannot stop hate crimes from occurring, we can instead be constantly educated by those advocating for Asian Americans online and around us.
That said, a good place to start would be right here. Please share our podcast on all social media platforms and to your friends and family. Every repost and share helps the cause tremendously.
There are also numerous additional options online as well for you. For all the information you'll need about AAPI advocacy nationally, check out stopaapihate.org, where you can sign up for a newsletter, talk to local elected officials, donate to the Asian communities that suffered losses, and even report hate incidents that you witness.
There are local sources as well. For those in Chicago, LA, or Atlanta, an Asian American support group in the city is called the AAAJ, which stands for Asian Americans Advancing Justice, is an organization that speaks out against prejudice and crimes against Asian Americans. The one branch in Chicago offers job roles and volunteer opportunities through their office.
And lastly, if you want to know more about the history of Asian Americans, then you can also visit aatimeline.com to read about the involvement of Asians in America's past.
COVID-19 impacted all of us in one way or another.
And since then, there are those that still try to find others to blame.
I hope we can stray away from that.
And instead, we can think of agreeable solutions for the problems we all have to face in our country.